ChemTutorial 0.2. We're going to be talking about lab safety. What are some proper safety techniques? What to wear when you go in the lab, what not to wear when you go in the lab, how to light a Bunsen burner, how to pour acids and bases together, what to do if they spill on you, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to go through all of those stuff right now. First thing, what not to bring into the lab. Pretty much everything that I'm wearing right now is stuff that you cannot bring in the lab. Like drinks, like this, water included, cannot bring that into the lab for obvious reasons that we are dealing with hazardous chemicals and we don't want you accidentally ingesting them. And food, so no chicken nuggets, leave them at your desk, or actually don't even bring them in the classroom. Backpacks, they need to be at your desk at all times. They be back in the lab. Jackets, you cannot bring jackets. If you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, it's got to be a long sleeve shirt that you can roll up the sleeves and they stay up. If they don't stay up, I'll probably take a rubber band and rubber band them around you so that they don't stay up or something like that. Also, do not wear hats. Guys, girls, both alike. Hats are not allowed in the school really at all, but especially not in the lab because they are a flammability hazard. Also, loose jewelry, girls, bracelets, long necklaces, things like that, all that has to be taken off before you go into the lab. So what to wear in the lab? Obviously, you can wear a t-shirt. You can wear long sleeves that actually stay up above your elbow. I recommend long pants, but that's not always necessary because we have lab aprons. Your hair needs to be tied up, which is a big problem for me. And closed-toed shoes, like, well, this. And then sometimes, depending on the lab you're doing, you're going to have to wear safety goggles, which if you're someone with glasses, that really sucks because you're 8 eyes now. No, you're 6. You're 6 eyes, I can count. And then some labs are going to require you to wear an apron, which case you have to put on before you go back into the lab. And then safety gloves are sometimes, again, recommended depending on what you're doing. Now I'd like to talk about some basic pieces of lab equipment that you need to be aware of and familiar with in the lab. I'm sure you're familiar with most of these things. On the screen, the first is a beaker. That's this very large piece of glassware right here. On a beaker, there's 2 sets of numbers, okay? There's a set of numbers that go upwards like this. See how it starts down here at 50 and then it ends at 300? That's the numbers that we look at when we're filling up the beaker with liquid, okay? So as you're filling up the beaker with liquid, you're able to measure the liquid as it rises up the beaker. Notice that the beaker numbers are in increments of 50. That's because we only use beakers to measure large liquids, okay? We don't measure small liquids in beakers. So for example, we would measure anything from 50 milliliters to 300 milliliters in this beaker. We would never measure anything that was 25 milliliters or 10 milliliters because this beaker cannot measure that precisely. Now let's look at the graduated cylinder. The graduated cylinder is the very skinny, tall piece of glassware. And I don't know if you can see this in the video or not, but there's numbers from 5 to 25 as you go up. So that means that this instrument can measure between 5 and 25 milliliters. So if I asked you to measure 14 milliliters of water, which instrument would you use? Well, you would use the graduated cylinder because it can measure 14 milliliters because it measures between 5 and 25. And 14 falls in between 5 and 25, okay? So for measuring small liquids, we use a graduated cylinder, but when we measure large liquids, we use a beaker. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is filtering liquids. And so we use filter paper to filter water. Okay, so this is the filter paper, and it always looks like a circle. In order to create a funnel with the filter paper, you first have to fold it in half like this, and then you fold it in fourths like this. And then once it's in fourths, you can kind of open up the center so that it's a circle and it actually forms a cone. This cone is going to be fit inside of a funnel. That's what this guy is right here. It's a funnel. And this funnel is placed into whatever you're pouring or filtering the liquids into, okay? Next, let's talk about transferring liquids. If I ever ask you to measure out a certain weight of powder, you're going to use an instrument called a scupula, and it's spelled just like it sounds, scupula. The scupulas When we're transferring large liquids into smaller containers, a lot of times this happens. I'll give you a beaker, okay, that has water in it, and I'll want you to put it into something a little bit smaller. This is called a flask. A flask has a round bottom, but then it tapers up at the top. So if I ask you to pour the large liquid into the smaller container, you never want to just trust your hands when you're pouring because you could always spill liquids. So that's when we use a funnel. The funnel's job is twofold. One, we can use it as a filter, but we can also use it to pour larger liquids, like something from a bigger beaker, into smaller containers. So you would put this end right here into the smaller container, like the flask, and then you would take your beaker and you would pour the large liquid through here so that it would avoid spilling. So you'll do that in the lab. And then also I will have you guys mix acid and water. Acid, if it's mixed with water incorrectly, it can cause an acid fire. So it's very important that we always have a beaker of water and we pour the acid into the water. We never, ever, ever pour water on acid, okay? So it's always acid into water, acid into water. And the way I remember that is because I think of one of my favorite drinks, and that's A&W root beer. A&W root beer reminds me that the direction that I always pour is acid into water, never water into acid, okay? Think, if you go water into acid, then you're spelling the word wah, which just means you're crying because you got caught in an acid fire. So next, I'm going to teach you guys about how to heat up chemicals using a Bunsen burner. So some of y'all may have used a Bunsen burner before in biology or in middle school, but if you haven't, you're going to learn how to light a Bunsen burner in level 2. So this is what a Bunsen burner looks like. We have our bases are round, okay, and then we have a stick coming out of it that's connected to a gas tube, and then we have our flame that just burns at the very top of the Bunsen burner. When you light a Bunsen burner, you want to light it in such a way that you get a blue cone in the center. That's really important that you get the blue cone in the center because then the temperature of the Bunsen burner will be at the temperature that we need it to be when we're heating up chemicals. There's a little round circular knob at the very base of the Bunsen burner. You can twist this knob at the very bottom to adjust how high your flame is. And so it'll take you a little bit of time to practice twisting the knob at the bottom for you to get that perfect blue cone in the middle. Once you have your perfect blue cone, let's say you want to heat up a test tube. There's only 2 things you need to heat up a test tube. The first is you need test tube tongs, okay? Test tube tongs are pictured in this middle picture right here. And essentially, it's got a handle that you hold right here, and then it's got a clamp part that holds onto the test tube right here. And this clamp part will hold on to your test tube. And then the second thing you need, obviously, to heat up a test tube is the actual test tube, which is shown right here. Now, there's something really important about the way this test tube is being held in the picture. Notice it's tilted. That's super important. When you're tilting a test tube, it's important to tilt it away from others and away from yourself, okay? So always, always, always tilt your test tube away from anyone. The reason why is because when you're heating up liquids in a test tube, it's very easy for those the liquids inside the test tube to boil over and spill out. And so you just don't want it boiling over in the direction of your lab partner or yourself. If you're going to heat up a beaker, let's talk about the setup for that. There are several things you need to heat up a beaker. The first is a ring stand, and that's this guy right here. The ring stand's job is just to hold the Bunsen burner, which is right here, okay? When you put the Bunsen burner on the ring stand, then you're going to attach the ring to the ring stand. The ring, you can see it, it's right here. It's the metal piece. It's a circular metal piece, and then it comes out like this, and there's a part right here that you can screw onto the ring stand, okay? And we always leave it just about a few inches from the top of the flame, okay? So the ring is always a few inches from the top of the flame. On top of the ring, we put a wire gauze, which is this guy right here. Let me spell that out. Gauze is G-A-U-Z-E. So the wire gauze goes on top. That allows the beaker to actually sit on top of the ring stand, okay? In order to take a beaker off if it's hot, we're going to use beaker tongs. And so beaker tongs just really look like big scissors. They kind of look like this. And then they have a circular part on the end here that can allow you to grab the beaker. So you'll use beaker tongs to remove the beaker, whereas you would use test tube tongs to hold the test tube, okay? The last thing I want to talk to you about is how to heat up a crucible. A crucible is just a very small ceramic bowl, okay? Small ceramic bowl. And the setup for heating up a crucible is the exact same as heating up a beaker, okay? You would need your ring stand, you would need your ring, you would need the wire gauze, and then instead of setting the beaker on the wire gauze, you would set the crucible on the wire gauze.